He's one of the biggest musicians in the world.
I want to see the whole of this stadium jumping up and down.
But even Ed Sheeran is not immune, opening up in the latest Rolling Stone.
You get into an industry where you're getting compared to every other pop star. So I found myself doing what Elton talks about in his book, gorging, and then it would come up again. I have a real eating problem.
He's hinted at his battle with disordered eating before.
They used to call me Two Dinner Teddy because I used to order 2 meals. And then you start putting on loads of weight and then you start hating the way you look and then you start, getting sad about that.
1 in 5 Aussie boys struggles with disordered eating. Often, men and boys suffer in silence because of the damaging misconception it's a women's issue.
We know when it comes to binge eating disorder, the prevalence is around 50% of men and women who are experiencing them. One of the biggest barriers to men seeking help or speaking about their illness is stigma.
In 2019, at least 360,000 Australian men were battling some kind of disordered eating, from anorexia to bulimia to binge eating. But experts fear that's just the tip of the iceberg, particularly once the pandemic hit.
Unfortunately, the stress has actually been a contributing factor to the development of eating disorders. We also know that when it comes to men, that eating disorders are largely underreported, misdiagnosed or not diagnosed.
While filtered and retouched images of influencers can be triggering for young girls, the same goes for buff, fit men flooding the social media feeds of young boys.
Eating disorders don't discriminate, and it's really important that we have these conversations that include the experience of boys and men so we can help more people seek the support that they need.
So how can we make sure young men love the skin they're in?
Mitch Doyle was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa at the age of just 11. He has recovered and joins us now. Mitch, can you take us right back? When did your battle with an eating disorder begin and why?
Yeah, so, it struck me at quite a young age, as you said, 11 years old. It's still, I was still a kid, I was still a child, navigating all of these, different things that were flying through my head at the time. There was a lot, I think, around being bullied at school about my weight, about my appearance, which we kind of just flick that off the radar at that age. Oh, it's just kids being kids. But the real impacts of that is that it had a significant impact on my mental health, and it kind of started this snowball effect into fixating on what I was eating, fixating on how much I weighed, how I appeared compared to others, my peers, and it was just this insidious snowball that just seemed to keep going.
It's usually not just about the numbers on a scale, eating disorders. Looking back, have you thought about what you were trying to soothe with your disordered eating?
Yeah, and that's what's, I'm really glad you raised that. The way that I've always framed it is the eating stuff is always just the tip of the iceberg. So we know that there's so much that goes on underneath the surface. So, how we think about ourselves, the beliefs that we hold about ourselves, worthiness, lovability, belonging, all of these kind of things that underneath the surface, those stories of I'm not good enough, I don't belong, I don't fit in, which then manifested into all of those kind of disordered eating behaviours.
Mitch, a lot of people will be watching this thinking, wow, you're so young going through all of this. Did you come across many other boys that were in the same boat as you?
Not one. The only person that I could recall when I was younger, I think it was Daniel Johns from Silverchair, knowing that he kind of spoke out about it at some points. But that was really all that I had to go off. So there was the only things that I could kind of read at the time was, eating disorders are heavily publicised in tabloids and things like that. So you'd see the Olsen twins on the front of magazines, you'd see celebrities on the front of magazines, and often trivialised. So there was no real point of comparison that I could look at and say, oh, that's kind of like my experience. I resonate with that person, that man, that guy. There was nothing really about it. It was, again, a very trivialised issue, and I'm glad to see that we're starting to make leaps forward with that.
Well, I guess that delivers us to Ed Sheeran in a way, doesn't it? He's outspoken about this and it's quite a striking thing. How important do you think that sort of voice is coming from someone like him?
Having someone like him speak out about it is incredibly powerful to reduce the stigma and shame that often surround eating disorders and disordered eating behaviour, because it's often that those behaviours go on for extended periods of time in shame because no one really knows how to talk about them. No one knows how to approach someone in their lives or talk about these things because they're kind of shrouded in that shame and in that secrecy. So to have someone like Ed talk out about it is, again, incredibly powerful to kind of lift the veil on that and hopefully open up a number of doors for people to feel comfortable to talk about it.
So many of the parents that I know are hyper-vigilant when it comes to their language around food when they're with young girls. Do we need to be as vigilant around all kids?
I think so. I mean, kids today are growing up in a world where they're on Instagram, they're on social media, they're seeing things from a number of different avenues about, you know, moralising foods, good foods, bad foods, whole foods, non-whole foods, fatty foods, all of these kind of words that kids don't really know, and even I don't even know as an adult what they mean. So there's so much information that's coming at kids and young people around, again, that moralising foods. Oh, that's a good food, that's a bad food. The reality is that for every single person, every single young person, their bodies are different. So we can't necessarily just go off an advice of a blogger or a TikToker or whatever it may be. We need to kind of put it down to the individual level and create fun, holistic messaging around food that kids will enjoy.
Mitch, we've really appreciated your insights. Thank you so much for your time tonight and for sharing your story.
No problem. Thank you.
And if you do need help, support is available through the Butterfly Foundation on 1800 33 4673, Lifeline on 13 11 14, and the Kids Helpline on 1800 55 1800.